There are some more seats up here in the front, so if you're standing because you didn't find a place, then please do come up toward the front. So, good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and a very, very warm welcome to Transforming Transportation 2018. I'm Melinda Crane, and it is a great pleasure to accompany you once again as moderator. The title of this year's forum is Realizing Sustainable Mobility for All in the Digital Era. And as global leaders working in the transport sector, you know far better than I do that we are seeing the dawn of nothing less than a transport revolution. Technology is dramatically transforming the way that we move both people and goods. The central question facing the sector and facing this forum over the next 2 days is how we make sure that that transformation moves in a direction that is good for people and good for the planet. Thanks to the Paris Climate Agreement and the 2030 Agenda, there is widespread agreement on what the direction needs to be, namely sustainable, and consensus is also building in regard to how we move in that direction. For example, in the form of the Sustainable Mobility for All initiative. As you'll remember, if you were with us last year, this initiative was launched by a diverse array of very prominent stakeholders, including our two hosts, the World Bank and the World Resources Institute. And it is a collective effort to transform mobility in line with 4 very concrete goals. So here is a short reminder on what Sum for All's all about. We've got it here on the screen. Can we? Yes, there we go.
Day, moving on the next. Transport modes have rapidly evolved, increasing in speed, autonomy, reliability. They make us go faster and farther every day. But mobility is not immune to the urgent challenges of this world. More people, more cars, a changing climate. The mobility choices of today will either lock us in congestion and pollution, or they will open the way for new possibilities. Universal access, efficiency, safety, and green. Sustainable mobility for all is not a dream, but it requires a revolution. These 4 goals, mutually reinforcing, will enable people and goods to continue moving better and faster, improving the health, the environment, the lives of billions, and helping stabilize climate change. We see a future of efficient and accessible mass transit for all, buses that move people quickly through busy cities, trains that levitate, commuters in the air and on waterways. We see solar roadways, electric cars, cars that drive themselves, freight that moves on trains, on boats, in airships. We see real-time traffic communication, a rise in time-efficient movement. We see dedicated bike lanes, bike shares, walking paths, access to jobs, schools, markets for all, a transportation environment that works for everyone. We all have a stake in this future. We all need to play a role in making it happen. Transforming the world's mobility requires a vision, bold actions, financing, and a global coalition. So join us. Sustainable mobility for all is not a dream, it is a revolution.
Let's applaud those goals. So let us begin now with a few words from our hosts. It is a great pleasure to welcome to the stage Laura Tuck, the World Bank's Vice President for Sustainable Development, and Andrew Steer, President and CEO of the World Resources Institute. Welcome to both of you. So let me just jump right in with a question to both of you, and it's about the direction of change in the sector. Is the transport that we have at the moment, Laura Tuck, the transport that we need and that we want, and what is your vision for the future?
Well, I guess the wrong answer to the first question would be yes, so I'll say no, but let's put it in the context of the 4 goals that we have in the Sustainable for Mobility Sustainable Mobility for All initiative. So if we just do a couple quick statistics. On access, the first one, something like 500 million people in Africa still don't have access to all-weather roads. If we look at efficiency and you look at our client countries and developing countries, they still pay something like 40 to 70% more for transit than in developing countries per dollar of imports or exports. When you look at safety, everybody knows about the 1.3 billion people who are killed every year in fatalities, but it costs something like $500 billion a year. And then in green, everybody knows that 1/4 of all emissions come from the transport sector. And of course, as we just saw in the movie, if we don't do anything, we're going to see a big increase in something like 50% in passenger traffic and 70% in freight traffic, with another billion people by 2030. But when you think of the vision, and I love this movie, so big kudos to the team who put this out, because it does lay out a bit of the vision. But I knew you were going to ask me this, so I was trying to think last night, what is the vision? Because I've really been struggling with this for a long time. So it's got to be intelligent, integrated, dynamic, that meets all of the 4 goals of the initiative, of course. So I think that people will move a lot less. We're going to have a lot more e-connectivity, and we'll have goods produced more in place. So hopefully the need for things to move around will be lower. But then we need this seamless multimodal transport that you saw in the scene, with greater interoperability that gets people back and forth quickly with a single payment kind of thing. People will go in public or shared vehicles or by non-motorized transportation, bike and footpath. The vehicles have to have no emissions, and they can't get their electricity from fossil fuels. People make decisions about the routes they're going to take and the times they're going to travel through the kind of systems you saw, the intelligent transportation systems, where we gather data and quickly share it with users. No traffic jams, because everybody's deciding. You've got sensors that avoid congestion. You have reduced parking speeds because of the autonomous driving. Trip costs go down. Vehicles don't crash. Cargo moves quickly across borders. Speed of deliveries comes down. Law enforcement doesn't have to pay attention to traffic because autonomous vehicles are going at speed. So you have this vision. Now, you saw some pictures in there on things like gondolas, Elon Musk tunneling, flying personal vehicles. I don't know where we're going on that part, but the first part, I think, is pretty clear. We know where we need to get.
Thanks very much. Andrew, I guess it's safe to assume that you also would say we don't yet have the transport that we need and want. But what is your vision of the mobility of the future?
Well, first, it's very nice to be here, and I'd like to add my word of welcome to everybody. And it's a great honor for the World Resources Institute to work with the World Bank. Thank you, Laura, Jose Luis. We've been doing this now for 10 years together. Thank you very much. When we started, transportation was a boring, engineering-driven area, wasn't it? And now look at it. I mean, couldn't be more exciting, could it? The dynamism in this room. So thank you, and I know that you and Annie Dasgupta will be summarizing at the end. So thank you very much. It's a wonderful partnership. No, we don't have the transportation we need. We live in this sort of world of paradox where we've never seen more progress on transport ever, but because the needs are growing and growing and populations are growing in cities, we're actually getting worse and worse by year at the moment. This is very depressing, and it's different from most other areas we work in development. If you think about it, on average, access to education is better now than it was 10 years ago. On average, access to health is better. So too in agriculture. Last year, 38 million people were lifted out of poverty. Never in the history of the world has poverty rates, now down to 8% acute poverty, been so low. But in transport, it's taking longer to get to work than before. Pollution is higher than ever before. So we live in this paradox where there's incredible progress and innovation and opportunities for change, but overall we're being overwhelmed. And what we need to do is perhaps learn a little bit from climate change. Climate change is also getting worse, but we know where we're going. We have a goal, which is the 2-degree road. For every single country, we now know who has peaked. We know 49 countries are improving on climate change. We know what will happen in the 2020s if they follow their plan. We have an idea. Do we have that yet for transport? We do know the transport system we want. We know the cities we want, the compact, connected, coordinated, resilient cities. In this room, there's more wisdom than in any other room in the world today on the kinds of transport systems we need. But what we need to agree upon is a sort of a strategy for the next 10 years, and the sustainable development, a sustainable transport for all, mobility for all, I think, is an incredibly valuable platform to help us get there.
Thanks very much. Let me pick up on some of those sustainable mobility for all goals that you mentioned, Laura, and perhaps beginning with access and the question how technology can help us improve access, and then car traffic. How do we make that efficient, greener? You talked about all of those as important goals. What can the World Bank do there to help?
So disruptive technology has been a big focus for us. We just had a retreat across all of SD trying to think how we can embrace technology. And it's very important for transportation. We've seen a lot of what it's doing. But if you just take the 4 goals, if you think about access, and you saw some using ICT technologies can really help, as Andrew just said, help the cities plan a lot better. So if you take a poor country like Haiti, we've been able to use big data to look at where poor people live and where they need to go to help design public transportation systems at low cost so that they can, because they're actually prevented from getting to work now because they don't go where they need to go or they cost too much. So we've been able to do that for access. For efficiency, you can also use the same kind of intelligent transportation system. So for instance, in the Philippines, the costs of traffic congestion have been estimated at about $60 million a day. So by using this kind of intelligent transportation system, kind of like Google Maps a bit, where you're collecting data from the cars that are going, and you can share this with users where you have accidents, where you have a lot of congestion, you can help users avoid it, and then you can help authorities start to plan their traffic management better. So that's a good. We're working with Brazil on a transit system that connects the different kind of multi-mode the different kinds of systems, the ferries, the metros, the trains together. With Belarus, you have these apps that you can put in your cars or your trucks that measure sort of how bumpy the road is and how fast people are able to go. So you can collect this and you can make decisions about the kind of investment you need. And then in countries like Georgia and Nepal, you have all kinds of technologies at the border crossing. So trucks can declare their cargo ahead of time. They can have one stop that it can pass through very quickly. You can do electronic scanning and electronic clearances, and you have a lot less time. So that's on the efficiency. And then on the green, of course, everything that's more efficient, that reduces emissions, that improves how fast things can flow, or use of public transport is going to reduce emissions. And a lot of countries are using electric vehicles now, made commitments, as Andrew said, as part of their NDCs. Also, World Resources Institute has this, it's not just about emissions, right, to be green. And World Resources Institute has this Global Forest Watch. So we can actually be sure as we construct roads, we're making sure we aren't deforesting. So that's another piece of green that's important to bring in. And then on safety, this is a really important piece of the 4 goals, I think, and using technology here. We're putting components into our road projects. We've got about $500 million of lending, but you could use GPS safety systems, wireless communications, and drones, and our global road safety program has been able to look out on thousands of kilometers of road to see where they need traffic improvements and investments to help improve it.
Thanks very much. I need that bumpiness app for my cycling in Berlin. Yeah. We have so many roads with cobblestones on them, and that sounds great. I'm going to look into that. Andrew Steer, how do you see steps to achieve this vision that you've talked about, the opportunity for change, and especially for cities? Both of you have stressed the importance of cities in the equation. And what is WR doing to make it happen?
Well, our motto at WRI is count it, change it, scale it. We're very good at counting. We bring billions of data points off satellites every day. We work with organizations all around the world, whether it's Google or whether it's World Bank, using increasingly modern data and big data and so on. I think the kind of thing that we're working on, Open Traffic, so it opens up all kinds of new data points. But we need serious research on the counting side. I mean, for example, just in the last 2 years, having demonstrated that of the $2 trillion that's spent a year on transportation, we could actually save money by doing it in a greener way, and that would be better for people, it'd be better for the economy. That's the kind of research which is absolutely important to drive things forward. So count it, we do a lot of measuring. But counting it on its own and the research doesn't get any points whatsoever. You have to change it. And so around the world, we're trying to, just like the World Bank is and everyone in this room is, we are trying to demonstrate sort of proof of concept on the ground. And it's an incredible privilege for us, you know, working, whether it's improving street safety with the authorities in Mumbai, whether it's working in Beijing on low emission zones, whether it's working in Santiago with regard to how do you finance electrification of public transport, or whether in Brazil in the Minha Casa program, which is the biggest low-income housing program, trying to figure out actually if you built the houses somewhere else, you wouldn't need quite so much transportation. You know, there's an idea, if you like, and it's so exciting and a privilege working around the world. So proof of concept, so count it, change it. But in today's world, quite frankly, changing is not enough. You then need to scale it. And that's what we need to talk about. And no one in this room works for an institution that on their own can scale it. Not even the mighty World Bank or mighty governments of the biggest countries in the world. Obviously, they have huge power. But in today's world, you need multi-stakeholder, smart, politically well-connected, financially well-connected, technically well-connected coalitions. And so it's the scaling part that's the most exciting and the most difficult, and we spend most of our time thinking about that.
Laura, let's pick up on that point, because clearly ad hoc action is not going to be enough to get us where we need to go. It's been a consistent message that you also have given here in this forum in the past, that coordination among relevant stakeholders is absolutely crucial. So what can be done to move all actors in the direction that we need to go, both in terms of advocacy, in terms of action, and in terms of financing?
So I think that's right. I mean, this is the third year I've done this with Andrew, and I think where we started, we felt like, you know, transportation was a little bit left out in the SDGs, that we were all working, there's a lot of great groups here, but we were all working by ourselves, a lot of duplication, a lot of things falling between the cracks, and worse, sometimes inconsistent messages, that we had to come together. And so bringing everyone, whether it was MDBs, NGOs, academia, bilaterals, whatever, countries, cities, financiers, everyone together to really think about what are the goals, what are the main objectives, how do we do this so that we're consistent. And now we have, I think last year we brought to you this idea of the Sustainable Mobility for All partnership. A lot of you were here, and it was very exciting to sort of announce it. And when I look at how far we all as a collective community have come in the last 18 months. I think there are 50 transport organizations and agencies, and I think we've really managed to position transportation now at the core of sustainable development, with the focus on climate and gender and safety and access, et cetera. I mean, just really bringing it to the core development goals. And so some of the things we've done that are just so impressive, the first ever assessment of mobility, the Global Mobility Report of 2017, which we launched in Bonn, which is a very impressive piece of work, the kind of assessment that it does. And then we have the first global tracking framework that have targets for each goal and data and indicators so that we can measure where every country is on each of these, and countries can get a sense of where they're positioned and who's doing better and what they can emulate. And then, together, we put out these country mobility snapshots for 190 developed and developing countries that help them assess their standings. So, I mean, it's really amazing when you think how far we've come and how much more information we have about what we've done and where we need to go, so countries can sort of get on this program. And I really think it's a testament, because all of you have come together and really the level, as we said last night, the level of cooperation and dialogue and engagement and openness to working together has been nothing short of outstanding. So.
Thank you very much. And Andrew, perhaps the request to you as well to just say a little bit more about stakeholder engagement and coalition building, because for you too, it's been a very consistent message. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the fascination of the technological innovations that perhaps we forget that that is the thing that will really drive us where we want to go. So just a word more, if you would.
Well, absolutely right. I mean, most of us from a technocratic background, I mean, we really do believe that that we can design things that are good for people, and actually we can only help people if they are totally 100% included. You know, if the average poor person in many African cities today is spending 40% of their incomes getting to and from work, we need to talk to them and find out what can happen. Go to Bangalore today, where we work. I think Madhav Pai is here, who directs our work on cities and transport in India. You'll find a metro system, you know, beautiful metro system, but designed in a technocratic way without real thought about the interaction of people to those stations, and working now with the government and working with citizens. What would it actually take to make a sort of dynamic interaction between people and those stations to improve the economy and so on? That's the kind of a stakeholder engagement. We're now working on something called Rickshaw Rising, the sort of final mile of transport systems, auto rickshaws in India. You can't do that unless you really engage with people. And this takes time. But the rate of return is fabulously high. But it's not just engaging with people down here, it's engaging with politicians up here as well. And we need to, as a community, become a little bit better at raising the issues politically. And it's so exciting what you're doing. I mean, 10 days from now, we'll be in Davos. And the question is, you know, where is transport in Davos with the rich and the powerful, the heads of state? You know, there'll be 60 heads of state there. There'll be CEOs from 500 companies from every country in the world. Where's transport? There are lots of events on transport. It's all about digital. It's all very, very exciting sort of. But where is the real clout to shift the needle on transport? For example, a heads of state panel will be established for oceans, for example. There'll be huge heads of state and government and ministerial things on climate. There'll be the same for health. We need to get transport up there as well. And when we do that, combined with consultation throughout the system, we will then be ready for that tipping point which we aspire to.
Thank you. You've given us, both of you, lots of food for thought and discussion, but let me ask you to just give one last message to those who are assembled here. So, question to you, Laura, what important issues you think will frame the action agenda in the future that perhaps haven't received quite as much attention as they should? What would you invite the participants here in the room of TT18 to be thinking about as they go through the conference?
Yeah. So I mean, Andrew's right. We've done a lot on climate. We've done a lot on road safety. We've done a lot. I mean, the big issues are out there. So let me just think. There are three things I would leave you with that maybe we haven't focused enough on. One is thinking across silos. So for instance, even within transportation. So autonomous cars, for instance, aren't very helpful if they're not, if we just pull people from public transportation, or if they're not electric, or if electric comes from coal, or, you know, so we have to be thinking across these different things. Greener cities will put in bike lanes and footpaths, but they may not be safe if they're not well lighted. So you have to think across these different goals and make sure they're integrated. That'd be the first one. The second one is we have to think across all modes. We've done a lot of thinking about road transport. And surface, we really need to bring, for instance, maritime in. That's where most of the freight is transported, and I think there's a lot of progress that needs to be there. And then finally, my last plea to this group would be to really think about the gender dimensions of transportation. I mean, this is near and dear to my heart. Not just women as users, but empowered women who are part of the decision-making process and can help make sure that the systems work for everybody, meet the goals. But if we think about it, something like 80% of women are afraid that they'll be harassed on public transportation. In Mexico, 64% of women say they have been. So what do we need to do about it? We know things work, like better lights, and not just on the cars, but all the way out to the street. More transit officers. We can do audits. The environmental, how the stations are laid out to be sure they seem safe. But other things, schedules for women so they can go get their kids after school, or the size of steps so they can get on with their skirts, or separate cars if they're in countries where that's important. We need to bring women into this conversation, so I would ask all of you to keep that on your mind as we move forward. But as I finish, just big thanks and congratulations to all of you for the work you've done, and we're delighted to be working with you.
Thanks very much. And that gender issue is going to be a very good reason to get up early tomorrow morning, because that is the first thing on the agenda on day 2 of this year's Transforming Transportation. So final question to you, Andrew, and you've pointed it out several times. Technological innovation is bringing exciting new solutions. It's also bringing new players into this discussion. And I wonder if you could just say why the group gathered here today, which does include some of those new players, is important, and how would you measure success for this year's forum?
Well, first, I just want to agree very much with what Laura said about the gender dimension. I mean, and we need indicators of safety in transport for women and girls. Look, I don't have a better answer than actually just to read out who's going to be speaking today. It is absolutely astonishing who we have here. And as I said before, it's when these different people come together and they inform each other and inspire each other. I mean, we're about to have a panel here that has Secretary Mishra. What he's doing on green transport, the ideas he brings, is absolutely incredible at the federal level through India. We've got Enrique Peñalosa. I mean, here's a man in a hurry trying to change the way we do city transport. I mean, my goodness me, on walking, cycling, and so many other things of public transportation. And next we have Davis Wang, who is head and creator of the most innovative bike-sharing scheme. I was in China last month and saw what Mobike is doing. And the way they're now even sharing their data, and they're thinking innovatively, not only about how do they make more money, but actually how do you make cities more efficient. Now, when these guys talk to each other, and then they bring in Robin Chase, the founder of Zipcar, but also the author of the incredible book Peers Inc., which just came out last year on the sharing economy. It's incredible. And then finally, from the private sector, you've got Philipp von Hagen, who I met this morning, who's sort of head of, if you like, I don't know, the think tank of Porsche and VW. My goodness me, I mean, why don't we just stop talking now and let them get on with it? So thank you and welcome, everybody. It's really fantastic to be here. Thanks.
Thank you very much to both of you.